Hey there, agility friend. If you've listened to a few of my podcast episodes, you know that I'm a huge fan of something called growth mindset. You can have access to the best instruction in the world, and you can have the best dog in the world and the best skills in the world. But if you don't have a solid mindset and approach to the challenges that sport and life are going to toss your way, you're not going to be able to really make the most of all of those bests that you have. You know, best instruction, best dog, best skills, all that stuff. I'm so passionate about the importance of our mindset when it comes to dog agility and really everything in life that I've written an ebook about growth versus fixed mindset, what the hallmarks of those two mindsets are, and how one can really propel you along your agility journey and one may really be holding you back, maybe without you even being aware of it. That ebook is not for sale anywhere, but it is available for free to subscribers of my email list. So if you're curious about what a growth mindset is, what a fixed mindset is, and how to ensure that you've got the right mindset for making the most of your dog agility training and handling journey, head to podcast.theagilitychallenge.com and scroll down till you see the link to subscribe to my email list and get that ebook. It's totally free and it's a game changer. Check it out today at podcast.theagilitychallenge.com. You've probably heard it said in many different ways. Take it a little bit at a time. Break it down into bite-sized chunks, one step at a time. And in dog training, be a splitter, not a lumper. Now, this advice to break things down works because it reflects the way our brains learn. Every skill is built out of smaller pieces or chunks. And yes, chunks and chunking are actually terms used by scientists who research how we learn. In Daniel Coyle's Little Book of Talent, which is the basis for all of my Agility Challenge talent tips, he says, chunks are to skill what letters of the alphabet are to language. Alone, a letter is nearly useless, but when we can use letters to make words, and words to make sentences, and sentences to make paragraphs, then we can make poetry, or a technical paper, or a novel, or a how-to book. Something complex and beautiful. Our dog training and handling skills are no different. A great agility run is merely a creation made up of tiny skills, which then make up larger skills, and so on and so forth. To start the process of chunking, you're going to want to first engrave the blueprint of the skill on your mind. And for that, take a look all the way back to Agility Challenge Talent Tip number 2 from earlier this year. And then ask yourself two things. Number 1, what's the smallest single element of this skill that I can master now? And then number 2, what other chunks link to that chunk? Now here's where it gets cool, because I know that you've had this feeling, but I've had this feeling of looking at our dog training as a mountain to be climbed. And if you try and stand at sea level and look at the top of the mountain, it seems insurmountable and it can be pretty demoralizing. But with this, all you need to do is think about number 1. What is the single smallest element of this skill that I can master now? And then practice that one chunk by itself until you've mastered it. Then connect more chunks, one by one, just the same way that you would combine letters to form a word. Then combine those chunks to make even bigger chunks, and so on and so forth. Now here's a practical example of chunking, and that would be course walking. So if you have a course of 20 or so obstacles, you maybe don't need to remember all 20 obstacles. You could typically break a course of 20 or so obstacles into 4 or 5 chunks. So instead of trying to memorize the whole course, work on memorizing one 4 to 5 obstacle chunk. So maybe the start line to a tunnel. So maybe it's jump, 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 tunnel. There's a chunk of 4 obstacles. And then maybe the dog comes out of the tunnel and it's jump, weave, jump, seesaw. There's another chunk. From the jumps to the weave to the jump to the seesaw, and so on and so forth. And then there's a third chunk and maybe a fourth chunk and maybe a fifth chunk if necessary. So then instead of having to manage one big 20 obstacle chunk, now you only have to manage 4 or 5 chunks of 4 or 5 obstacles each. And it's much easier to remember as a pattern. Another example of chunking would be, let's say, seesaw training. So you break down all of the elements of the seesaw, the movement, all the elements that the dog has to deal with, the movement of the board, the height of the board, the noise of the board, and the stationary position that you want your dog to adopt at the end of the board. And instead of trying to work on all of those things at the same time, you're going to work on all of those chunks separately. And it might not even look like a seesaw when you work on some of those chunks. So for example, when it comes to the movement of a seesaw board, you don't need a seesaw to help your dog get comfortable with the idea of something moving underneath them. So it could be, one of my favorites is to put a dog in a garden cart with 4 wheels and then put them in a wheelbarrow that only has 2 wheels. Or maybe when they're a puppy, I'll take them to the pet store or the hardware store and put them in a shopping cart. That helps them deal with the idea of movement that they can't control, which is what happens on the seesaw. When it comes to noise of the seesaw, again, you don't need to have a seesaw to get your dog comfortable and maybe even excited about the idea of making noise. So it might be that you teach your dog to bump an empty soda can with their nose. And then you work up to teaching your dog to bump a pyramid of empty soda cans with their nose, and the soda cans go crashing around, and the dog is super excited about it because in the middle of this pile of soda cans is a piece of beef liver or something like that. So the chunks don't need to necessarily look like the finished product to help you or the dog learn how to deal with the concept that's going to be present in the finished product. You can work on the elements of the seesaw training entirely independent of one another on obstacles, like I mentioned, that don't even look like a seesaw, and your dog will still learn those elements or chunks of behavior that are required to eventually come together to make a seesaw behavior, which is a constellation of other smaller behaviors. And when you're chunking and thinking about breaking things down, you're thinking about those pieces more instead of just working on autopilot and just, not really paying attention closely to what you're doing. And if you're not paying attention and you're in autopilot, then that's that unproductive swamp of shallow practice that I was talking about. What you want to be doing is thinking, because thinking is good for learning and autopilot isn't. Now I'll leave you with yet another quote from The Little Book of Talent by Dan Coyle. And that is, no matter what skill you set out to learn, the pattern is always the same. See the whole thing, break it down to its simplest elements, put it back together and repeat. And that also goes along with another one of my favorite quotes by a master trainer named Bob Bailey, who, if you've ever heard of Bob Bailey's chicken camps, those are pretty fun stories and pretty great training opportunities. And that's an even simpler quote, which is think, plan, do. So see the whole thing, think about it, break it down to its simplest elements, plan, put it back together. And that can also be part of the planning, and then do, and then repeat. That's it for Agility Challenge tip 15. If you haven't had an opportunity to go back and check out the first 14 tips, go ahead and check them out. They're good. And then leave a comment below and let me know what you think about this tip about breaking things into chunks, how chunking has helped you with your training and handling. And I'll see you guys next week for the next Agility Challenge tip. Thanks for joining me on the Agility Challenge podcast with Daisy Peel. If you'd like to take your agility training, handling, and mental game to the next level, check out that ebook that I mentioned at the top of the episode. You can get it for free at podcast.theagilitychallenge.com. It's not for sale anywhere, and it's only available to subscribers of my email list. Getting on board with the right mindset when it comes to your dog agility handling and training challenges is a game changer, so make sure you check it out.